Stay tuned now for Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome, everybody, to Westchester Eye on the Radio. I'm Peter Moses. My voice is still cracking a bit from some laryngitis. And
but we're glad to have you back.
Thank you, John. I'm here with John Sharan and Ardina Seward. Ardina has been with us now for a year.
Is today my anniversary?
This month is a year that you've been on the show, and it's amazing what you've added to the show. You've booked 95% of the guests since you've gotten here. Almost all of them are scintillating. A couple of them have been insane.
But that doesn't mean they weren't scintillating.
The murderer down in South Africa, who he was a little bit out of it.
Well, everybody has the right to be heard. We want to spread it around,
Actually, I don't know. After the last year of Trump, I don't think everybody has a right to be heard. I think some people should be seen and not heard, but that's just me. But our guest today doesn't fall in that category. And we have questions for her because the political landscape in Westchester is being reformed almost as we speak. We have with us today Assembly person Shelley Mayer, who has been in public life for years.
Yeah, forever.
She started
a while.
Started with Bobby Abrams in New York State at the Attorney General's office, right, and worked for another Attorney General, and has been an elected official in Yonkers and the Yonkers area, the area around Yonkers, for many, many years, and is now running for state senate. Right?
Running for the nomination.
For the nomination for state senate.
Correct.
To replace George Latimer, who is now our incoming county executive. But my question to you is, with Mike Spano going for the Senate seat, have you at all been approached, or are you now considering switching and running for mayor of the city of Yonkers?
No, I'm fully in this race to run for the Senate. I have been from the beginning. I think it's a very good opportunity for someone like me to impact a significant number of people and really use my experience in Albany and in Westchester to serve them. So, no, I'm all in for the Senate race.
How would it be different if you decided to switch gears? What you're saying you're not doing. You have been approached, though, correct?
Well, for a long time, for the 5 years that I've been in the Assembly, I only represent Yonkers. So I've been immersed in the Yonkers life. And, of course, one thinks about when Mayor Spano is term limited in 2019, there's 2 more years, what will happen next. But even before George won so decisively, it was clear to me that this seat, if George were to win, is a really good fit for my set of skills, which is 30 years of experience in Albany on progressive causes.
Started in childhood.
Started past childhood, I would say. And then combined with the fact that I was head of the Attorney General's office in White Plains for the whole county, and I lived in White Plains for 18 years, I think I bring the right set of skills. So I appreciate and am flattered that people think I would be a good candidate for mayor of Yonkers. That's not on the table. I am running for the Senate.
John.
I was just wondering, what do you think are the key issues that will be facing you that people should know about?
Well, I don't think it's not something we anticipated if you had asked me 6 months ago, but the impact of the tax bill on this district is going to be very substantial.
That's true.
Everyone has property tax that owns real property that's over $10,000. When you combine property tax plus income tax, and Yonkers, for example, has a personal income tax as well, plus sales tax, all those were deductible. If this bill goes through, and it appears it will, there's going to be, our houses are going to be of less value. People's ability to pay for their expenses will be less because they're not going to get this deduction.
I had heard that in California they are taking the position that is supposedly supported by the Federal Internal Revenue Service, that taxes can actually be made as a charitable deduction. And the IRS has apparently said that it can, and California is going that route. Do you think that will happen here in New York?
Well, that's exactly the kind of thing. We need to be creative in helping the people of this district, in fact, all of New York, which is targeted by this tax bill, find a way to survive through a very, very poor tax decision. And that kind of thinking about using it as a charitable deduction. Some people are exploring whether you could prepay your property tax and get the credit this year. We need to be creative. That is unfortunately going to be one of the number one issues. Obviously, I am a big proponent of funding for public schools. I've spent my 5 years in Yonkers focused on the Yonkers public schools and delivering more every year, more above what is projected in the formula. But every school in this district requires an advocate, whether it's Portchester or Harrison. The advantage of being an expert on public school financing is substantial, and I look forward to bringing that to the table.
Well, we're here talking with Shelley Mayer, and we're talking about the issues that are facing New York. Shelley is considering seeking the nomination for the position.
No, not considering. She's seeking it.
Well, she is seeking. She hasn't gotten it, but she is seeking it, and to be the replacement for George Latimer in the New York State Senate. And when we talk about these issues, tell us a little bit more about what you think people need to know about you.
After the break.
Oh, okay.
Is it the break? Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I'm sorry. My volume was down. I had not heard the music.
Yes, so we're going to be back with Westchester Eye on the radio and Shelley Mayer after the break on WVOX and WVOX.com. Remember, this is a long break with a Fox Business and a Fox News break. We'll be back.
And now with Fox News commentary, here's Fox News Radio's Todd Starnes. WVOX Worldwide.
1460 WVOX. Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
And we are back live on the radio. This is our last show for 2017. It's an important show because we have Shelley Mayer, or Meyer, am I pronouncing your name right? Mayer, Shelley Mayer. And I am Ardina with Peter Moses and John Sharan. So, Shelley, we were talking earlier, before the break, about your ambitions in politics and your life experience in politics. And so follow up on that.
Well, I grew up in Westchester, and I like to tell this story. My father, who was a loyal Democrat, both my parents were, ran 4 times for office in the 50s and 60s. In fact, he ran for the state Senate himself in 1960 when John Kennedy was running. He ran even though he knew Democrats would lose because he believed in the process of democracy. He believed in standing up for what you thought, a civil way of disagreeing with people, but standing for principles and a party. And I learned that early on. I campaigned for him as a little girl. I was always involved in political change. I had the opportunity to work for Attorney General Bob Abrams for 12 years. And when he started the Westchester Regional Office, because I had a feel for Westchester, he asked me to head it. So I did. And then shortly thereafter, he asked me to start going to Albany to work on his bills involving renters' rights, women and children's issues, and civil rights issues, because I had been in the Civil Rights Bureau previously. So I started going to Albany in 1987. I've been going for 30 years, really not only learning the ropes, I think I know them now, but fighting for bills and issues in the budget that I thought were right, win some, lose some, having good personal relationships on both sides of the aisle, and very mindful of how do you make change. I did that for a long period of time until Bob Abrams and the Democrats lost. I became a special counsel to the Democratic leader in the state Senate, Marty Connor. I spent several years at a big hospital system in New York City, St. Luke's Roosevelt and Beth Israel, dealing with their community politics and their matters in Albany. And finally, I had the opportunity to run for the Assembly in 2006 against Mike Spano. At that time, he was a Republican. I came very close. I didn't win. I went on to become the top lawyer for the Democrats in the Senate. So I really know how the Senate operates, and I have a great fondness for it because it can be the best of a democracy if you allowed people to really act in good faith and you didn't have some of the problems that we see now with the splitting up of the majority, and I can talk about that. Thereafter, when Mike Spano ran for mayor, I ran for his seat, and I've been there since the last 5 years. So I grew up in Yonkers, but I lived in White Plains as well. I have what I think is a very good feel for Westchester as a whole, from the Yonkers to Portchester and Mamaroneck and Rye and all the parts in between. I think I have a good feel for that, and I have a combination of support based on my work from the labor community, from the civil rights community, from the activist community, and I think it's quite a year for a woman to run, frankly.
But you're going, assuming that you would win, you are going from politics of one town to the politics of 8 towns, 9 towns,
Right.
which are the bulk of which are affluent. Yonkers is probably one of the poorest towns.
Well, Mount Vernon isn't affluent.
Mount Vernon.
And
She doesn't have Mount Vernon.
Not Mount Vernon.
But you have Portchester, which is certainly not affluent.
But Yonkers is the largest and probably is a city that has the most needs, the greatest needs. So would you be able to can you say that you could govern equally between Bedford, which is Martha Stewart's hood, to Jay-Z's, not Jay-Z, but to I think it's DMX. I don't know.
Yeah, DMX.
DMX's hood in Yonkers. I mean, you're talking about two. They're vast differences with with different economic needs.
Well, I'd like to say I'd be in the model of George Latimer. I'm different than George, but we've been colleagues and friends, and George did this job exceptionally well. He did represent the seniors of Yonkers and the affluent communities that are part of the district. He represented them all. He was aggressive about their issues, something I pride myself on. I have a reputation in Yonkers as being a true fighter, a real fighter for the issues that I've cared about and that were important to the city. But no, I feel very capable of representing the diverse interests. That's one of the wonderful things about Westchester. It goes from a Yonkers, which I am fully embrace and have great love for as someone who grew up there, to the Bedfords. And, we're all going to live together and do well together. And thank goodness with George's leadership, in my opinion, we are going to move ahead. So I feel very confident about that part of it. I think that I can do a good job, and I will be a good listener. Part of being good in elected office is not knowing all the answers, but is listening to people. And I consider myself, maybe because I grew up with 3 brothers and sisters and I have opinionated children, I'm very capable of listening, including to people who disagree with me. It does not faze me.
What about the tax issue? We had talked about that before, but the concern is that it's going to come down like a hammer,
Right.
particularly in poor districts. It'll happen in the more affluent districts also, but it's going to have a huge impact, particularly within the school systems. I mean, Yonkers it can hardly keep up with the rising student population as it stands. You're talking about overcrowding, lack of books, the whole 9 yards. So then, how do you? What's going to happen down the road? What's going to happen to a mother who has 3 kids in the system and she's concerned about the quality of education within Yonkers?
Well, I think hopefully today Governor Cuomo is going to sign a bill that represents the best of creative thinking about how to deal with schools, that we worked closely with the mayor and the city council and all the elected officials, that changes the way we get reimbursed for new school construction, for Yonkers only. So that's the kind of creative thinking we have to have. Yes, you point a real problem, which is how do we deal with these challenges at a time when we're probably going to have less money, not only from the tax bill, but the result of the federal budget, plus a projected state deficit. We have serious fiscal problems, no question. But we have to be creative. We're going to have to see where we can join forces, maybe with other communities, use our schools more effectively. For example, I'm a big fan for using schools longer than the school day. I believe that there's a way that schools should be a community resource. We have these great buildings, and why should they not be used after 3 o'clock? Why should they not be used on weekends? We have to find a way to get to the resource.
And we will talk more about that when we get to the other side of this break. You're listening to Westchester Eye on the radio. Our guest is Shelley Mayer. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back.
We will be back.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to Westchester Eye on the Radio, our weekly discussion of issues relating to Westchester and the surrounding area. I'm John Sharan, along with Ardina Seward and Peter Moses, and today in studio we have New York State Assemblywoman Shelley Mayer, who's planning to seek the nomination to take over for George Latimer's spot, since George will be shifting over to be our new county executive. And Shelley, you'd mentioned an interesting comment before about how you've reached across the aisle and spoken and have friends on both sides of the aisle in Albany. I think a lot of people who only see what goes on in Washington seem to think that there is complete and total dysfunction in terms of government being able to work with each other. Is that the case in Albany?
I haven't found it to be the case, and I'll give you some examples. I have a number of bills where I'm the sponsor in the Assembly, and under the current organization of the Senate, where the Republicans and the IDC, this independent group of Democrats, are really the working majority, I've partnered with Republicans and members of the IDC to be co-sponsors, worked closely with them, fought on issues of, I worked closely with Senator Flanagan as the leader with Senator Stuart Cousins to get additional funds for Yonkers one year when they had the $55 million shortfall. So I believe, one, you should keep open communication on a personal level. You know, at the end of the day, most people are there for the right reasons. There are bad apples. We should get rid of them, or we shouldn't elect them, or we should get them out of office. But the vast majority of people in the Assembly and in the Senate are there because they care about their districts, their constituents. They believe they can make a difference, and they're reasonable about most things. Partisanship, yes, it's a problem. I think there should be less of it once elected. I believe in running on a platform. But once you're elected, your job is to serve everyone. And that's been my style. And even as counsel for the Senate Democrats, when they were in the minority and majority, I worked very closely with my Republican counterparts to move things forward and to be respectful of the differences. So I believe there is opportunity to get things done. And I think people are cynical and frustrated by what they see in Washington. They believe that, you know, nothing gets done.
They believe that there's no compromise.
Yeah,
and I think that compromise is essential if you're going to want to get anything done.
No question. No question. You're not going to win all your battles, and you're not going to win most of your battles. You're going to get 50%, 60% if you're lucky. And so your job is to try to deliver, to explain to your constituents why you might have gotten less than they would have liked, and to your constituents who disagree with what you did, why you did it. So I
hear that a good bill is a bill in which every member of the determining body that's out there trying to make a decision, in which every single member feels that they gained some of what they wanted, but not everything.
Well, I think that's probably true, and certainly the ones that I've worked on, this one that I hope to have signed by the governor today, today's the 10th day, involving a speeding up of the reimbursement for school construction because Yonkers needs it. Other bills that I've worked on, they are not perfect. They are a step in the right direction, and that's exactly what people expect. Most people are quite reasonable about their expectations, but they have gotten burned by what they've seen in Washington. And I think, of course, we've had some bad times in Albany as well. And I think it's our job to restore their faith by acting in good faith, ethically, being responsive, being respectful. And I think the personalization of our differences is not a good development in American politics.
Well, we saw a huge voter turnout in the Roy Moore contest.
Right.
People who hadn't voted before suddenly came out of the woodwork, and they were there, and the people spoke, and he was defeated. Traditionally, there hasn't been a huge voter turnout for these types of elections, particularly local elections. So what would motivate people at this point to vote in the upcoming Senate election?
Well, this is a critical election for whether the Democrats ultimately become in the majority in the Senate. So right now, if there's 2 vacancies in the Senate, if those are filled by Democrats, one is this George Latimer seat, one is in the Bronx, and if Simcha Felder, a Democrat who currently allies himself with the Republican conference, were to come back, and the independent Democrats would come back, there would be a majority. And why does that matter? Because in the majority, Democrats in the Senate can do the kinds of progressive legislation that we've adopted in the Assembly, but we don't have a partner. Whether it's the DREAM Act, and that's a different DREAM Act than the federal, but it would authorize under limited conditions the ability to get TAP loans, TAP grants for students who are here and came here as children and then went through public high school to graduation and are otherwise eligible. That kind of bill, paid sick leave, the beginnings of like they have in New York City. These are kinds of things we can't get. I know I've worked very hard on rental reforms for rental tenants. I have one of the biggest rental properties in the county in my district, Crestwood Lake Apartments. We need to change some of the rent laws because affordable housing is a tremendous challenge in Westchester. We can't do it without a Democratic Senate. So this seat is pivotal to whether the Democrats take control and whether Senator Stewart Cousins becomes the leader, which I believe she should be, of the Senate Democrats. That means she sits down with the governor and the Speaker of the Assembly and helps negotiate the budget. And without her at the table, the voice of the Yonkers and the Mount Vernons and the Portchesters is not being heard. And I don't think that's correct. So it's an important race. And one, we need people to be excited. I believe, notwithstanding that I might be the oldest person chronologically, I think I bring the most enthusiastic supporters to the table. Some of the new voters, newly registered voters, people who are very excited about the opportunity for Democrats to win, women voters who were incredibly instrumental in Alabama, union voters who I've been working closely with who really have a vested outcome in whether the Senate becomes Democrat. So I think if you can energize people, say this election really matters. It's going to matter to me in my life. I think we can bring people out.
And you spoke about affordable housing, which has kind of been a hot button political issue, because there are towns. White Plains is what 80% gentrified at this point. Now the same thing is happening in other towns throughout the county. So how do you balance the benefits of gentrification, getting rid of urban blight, with people who need affordable housing? There has to be some kind of equation where there's fairness on both sides, but it doesn't always seem to work.
Well, I agree, Ardina. I think one of the challenges is that we've sort of abandoned, one, the development of new housing. I've worked hard to support the Yonkers Municipal Housing Authority and other municipal housing authorities like they have in Tuckahoe and in New Rochelle. Those are affordable. We should just make them as good as we can. Secondly, we need to protect rent-stabilized housing. We have thousands of units in Westchester that are rent-stabilized, and they're falling out of the rent-stabilized market. Those are a source for a mother with 2 kids or a mother and father with 2 kids. Those are a place that you could afford to live. We have diminished the supply substantially because of the way the law is currently constructed. And I agree with you. While we want to develop new housing and we want to have affordable housing, we have to figure out how to bring in people who have assets, who want to live here. Great, good. That's always been wonderful for Westchester. At the same time, we don't want to lose those who we all know are struggling to get by and choose to live here as well. So I think there is some balance that needs to happen. And frankly, that's one of the reasons we need a Democratic Senate.
What about the we could go from housing to horses, and we had talked earlier about one of my favorite places. Not that I gamble, but I just like the aesthetic of Yonkers Raceway. I love to see the horses trotting. It's just beautiful. But anyway, so much for that. There is a plan about to move the harness racing portion of Yonkers Raceway to Belmont and to expand Empire Casino, which could be a good thing because it'll bring in jobs, it'll bring in much needed tax revenue. Where is that now in the works, and what's the political buzz?
Well, I'm going to wait to get briefed by the owners, the Rooney family, about what their plans are. I think they're having discussions with as many potential partners as possible to see how to move to the next stage. They want to continue to grow and they're looking at various options on the table. And I certainly look forward to partnering with them and figuring out the best way, both for the people of Yonkers and the people who enjoy coming, and our need for revenue.
All right, we're going to be going to break now. When we come back, we're going to talk more to Shelley Mayer about her race for the state Senate, which, as we know, is upcoming, and it's a special election. This is Westchester Eye on the Radio on WVOX and WVOX.com. We're looking forward to our final quarter hour of the year, and we'll be right back after these words.
WVOX. Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to the final quarter hour of this year, this week edition of Westchester Eye on the Radio. I'm John Sharan, along with Ardina Seward and Peter Moses, and our special in-studio guest is Assemblywoman Shelley Mayer, who's going to run for the nomination for...
She is running for the nomination.
It should be mayor for mayor, that kind of,
you know,
kind of has that
until,
ring of
the bottom line is, until it actually happens, it's going to run. So, for State Senator George Latimer's seat, and we're talking about the different issues facing the different communities that seat represents. And Ardina, you were mentioning some things in off the air. We don't have a lot of time left to talk, so I figured I'd bring that up. What about some of the issues facing Yonkers? What are some of the things that can be done there to try and help? Because it seems that this squeeze in terms of tax revenue may be something that could negatively affect them more than other communities.
Well, certainly every year the Yonkers Public Schools need more funds, really in a dramatic way. People don't understand that they don't have everything that every other suburban district has. So that's been the number one priority for me, working with the city on that. Secondly, as you know, I care a great deal about the ability of our neighbors to be working on these projects of development at the Yonkers waterfront. The Yonkers waterfront is booming. It doesn't happen to be in Senator Latimer's district. But I care deeply that many of our neighbors who are members of the skilled trades unions have not been able to get those jobs. And I think that's not optimal from a safety and a financial point of view. But two, I think it's very unfortunate because these are people who really need these revenues in order to remain committed to our communities. They are the ones with their kids in the schools and involved in our churches and involved in our civic life. So I have a bill that actually passed the Assembly that would require, once an IDA, basically a development agency of a municipality, gives tax benefits, it triggers a requirement there be prevailing wage. That is the language that the state uses to bring in primarily union contractors, and then they have to negotiate with union builders. And the point is not just pro-union. The point is safety, cost effectiveness, and our neighbors being able to be beneficiaries of our own tax dollars. So I'm going to continue to fight very hard for that. If I get elected to the Senate, I'm going to champion that as I have in the Assembly.
How does your platform differ much from Mike Spano's? Because I know that you two in Yonkers have had to work together.
Oh, absolutely, and we do.
Is this awkward for you?
No, politics, again, if you take out the personal and focus on what your job is, you don't get stuck in awkward. I'd like to say I think I'm the better candidate for this very diverse district because I lived in White Plains. I have a feel for Westchester beyond Yonkers. This first choice is by Democratic district leaders. I've been a Democrat all my life. I grew up in the Democratic household. Mike Spano was a Republican and changed parties. All due respect to him.
And his famous brother, Nick.
And he has a big family with many family members involved in politics. Good for them. But right now we are trying to pick a strong Democrat to run in a seat where it's really going to matter that you stand for Democratic values across a broad spectrum. And I think that I am the better candidate. And coupled with my experience directly in the Senate, Mike was in the Assembly for a long time, but he was in the minority because he was a Republican then, and the Democrats were in the majority. I have been in the majority in the Assembly, and I worked in the Senate for 4 years, both on the minority and the majority side. I have a real feel for how the Senate operates on day one.
On that note, we're going to let you go because you have to go to Yonkers to go see the guy you want to replace. You have a meeting with Mr. Latimer.
My colleague.
Your
Still
colleague.
my colleague
Still your
till the
colleague.
end of the year.
So we're going to let you go. We're going to wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so
And
much.
I think maybe if we can put it together, maybe we'll bring you and Mike Spano on together and we can just chat at some
My
point
pleasure.
in the
Anytime.
near future. Shelley,
Thank you so much.
thank you for coming. And so, guys, we are reaching the end of our first year together as a team. I think it was great that we had Shelley on today.
That's right. She is a fitting guest for our anniversary.
Absolutely. John and I have been friends for 34 years. You and I have been friends for 33 years.
Sure. Long time.
And it's been an interesting ride. I'm looking forward to our new year. What are you doing for Christmas, Ardina?
Well, my daughter's coming over with her beau, who I'm beginning to like more and more and more. He's a nice guy. And we will have our annual Christmas celebration. Which means we'll probably eat Chinese food.
But vegetarian in their part, right?
Oh no! Caitlin is a dyed-in-the-wool carnivore.
She's a meataholic.
That's
Okay.
right.
You're the one who will be eating vegetarian.
I'm the vegetarian, so it's going to be the war of vegetables versus the cow.
Speaking of which, John, when was the last time you had a vegetarian meal?
A dinner or any vegetarian meal?
Well, an omelet at the diner, I guess, would be vegetarian.
No, that wouldn't. I mean, what I'm talking about is something like, I've had situations where I've had for a late lunch.
He's obfuscating, you know that.
No,
don't you?
I've had a late lunch where I've had spinach and feta cheese and in a
Okay, then let's
like
skip to dinner, John. When was the last time you went to a vegetarian restaurant for a meal?
That would be an Italian meal where I had eggplant parmesan.
So that's about it, though, right?
That's about it.
That's
yeah,
about it.
yeah.
So we're going to Montreal for Christmas. My family and I, who all hate the cold, rather than go south, we like to go to Montreal every year. So most of the time we've gone in the summer when Montreal is beautiful and walkable and incredible, and they have a wonderful Jewish community, and they have a panoply of vegetarian restaurants throughout the city, and you can walk through the city. I mean, the city of Montreal is an island, and it's larger than Manhattan Island. Most people don't know that, but Montreal is an island. It's got the St. Lawrence River on one side, and the other side it's got some other river whose name I don't remember, but there's a city across from Montreal on the north end called Laval, which I'm sure you've heard of Laval.
Well, it also has the Ile de Notre Dame, where we had Expo 67 back then, and also it's where they have a major automobile race in Canada every year, the Grand Prix of Canada.
Yeah, and it goes through the city of Montreal. So last year we went for Thanksgiving, which I thought was damn cold. Now we're going soon, in the next couple of days, and our first full day in Montreal, it's going to be the highest temperature, I believe, is 11 degrees.
Better you than me.
And the low is 3 or 4 degrees.
You're a glutton for punishment, Moses.
Well,
I'm
you
telling
know what? Even though I don't like the cold, if you're going to be somewhere in the cold, best it be a place where you have great friends, where there are wonderful museums, where culture matters, and where they have an outdoor Christmas culture that's far and away better than anything I've ever heard of in North America. I mean, they have nighttime events in the freezing cold in the Quartier des Spectaculaires.
Well,
I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right. I'm probably not. I don't speak French.
Having been up to the Great White North before, Peter, you are familiar with the fact that, one, it's amazingly similar to Europe in the way that it is.
It's very European, and they have these great Christmas markets.
And the other thing is that Montreal, as well as Toronto, are amazingly clean cities. They're very, very different than what you get in many American cities.
So most of the time we stay in a part of Montreal that is just in the process of being reclaimed as a neighborhood called Griffintown. It's near the Farine Five Roses sign. It's on the Lachine Canal. It's about a mile from the Atwater Market. But the hotel that we usually stay in, we're not staying in this year because we're bringing our daughter and
her fiance,
her soon-to-be fiance, with us, and I didn't feel like spending $350 a night for 2 hotel rooms.
I see.
So we're renting an Airbnb in a completely different neighborhood called Outremont. Now there's a T at the end, but I guess in French the T doesn't make any difference, so it's
silent.
So it's silent. And Outremont is a neighborhood in Montreal that is quickly becoming more hipster, which I'm not thrilled about. But the people who live there, who have money, are very happy about. But it's also home to 20,000 Hasidic Jews. So being there for Christmas, those stores will be open.
Yes, they will.
We don't have to worry about that. And I don't think they have any mitzvah tanks, so nobody's going to come over to me and ask me to lay tefillin. Laying tefillin means wearing this leather straps on your head and boxes on your head and on your right arm. And they won't be doing that in that part of Canada, but in that part of Montreal. But we're very much looking forward to going. I bought a couple pair of long johns. I have earmuffs. And I bought a balaclava, which makes me look like someone for Friday the 13th, but I'll at least be warm. And I wish both of you a wonderful Christmas vacation.
Thank you, Peter.
And
I hope your Hanukkah was nice.
Thank you. And to our loyal listeners who've been with us now for 5 or 6 years, we've been doing this show, we wish all of you, collectively, that you have the most wonderful of holiday seasons. And we'll be back on the air on January 8th, where we can regale you with more tales and better and great guests, as Ardina has been putting them together. Everybody, Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.